Question 1. I feel I would be suitable for this role due to the experiences that I can bring to the role. First of all, I've spent the last 15 years working as a clinical midwife within the NHS. I've therefore had to deal with a variety of different people from different backgrounds who are pregnant and often come into pregnancy with differing long-term conditions and backgrounds that will need support during their pregnancy. Sometimes these ladies have had asthma, and so I am aware of how asthma can affect pregnancy and how pregnancy can affect asthma. Also, in the last 15 years, I've worked as a clinical researcher, and I have had even more experience of people with long-term health conditions and lung conditions during this time. I have worked with people who have COPD, lung cancer, and other lung conditions where I've had to talk to them and talk to their clinicians in order to ascertain if they would be suitable to be invited to take part in research, and then to speak to them to see if they would like to take part in research, and then recruited them to trials where necessary. I understand the reasons why people develop lung conditions, and also why people may find it difficult to manage their lung conditions, and also why they may find it difficult to exercise when they have a long-term condition. During my Masters in Health Psychology, I've also learned about the 98 different behaviour change techniques. I've learned about the 5 competencies of being a health psychologist. I've learned about motivational interviewing and the 4 aspects to this. And I've also learned about CBT. I feel that all these things together will be able to combine me into the perfect person for this role. I feel that I'm able to use my life experience and the experience of what I've learned on the Masters to be able to work with people who have long-term conditions and work with them to be able to come up with ideas of how they can manage their conditions better. I also have lots of experience in the NHS of working with IT systems and of having not only face-to-face consultations with people, but also remotely and over the phone. Question 2. I feel I would be able to provide a person-centred approach as I am an extremely empathetic person. I've thoroughly enjoyed learning about motivational interviewing and feel that the skills that are needed for this I do possess naturally, and putting this into practice has been really enjoyable for me. I feel that using motivational interviewing would be a large part of how I would address this issue of motivating people and having a person-centred approach. And what I would do is I would sit down with someone, I would evoke from them exactly what the situation was, I would build a rapport, and then I would gradually summarise back to them what they felt their issues were and work with them to try and get them to suggest ways that they may be able to increase exercise. I would make them feel good by using affirmations, and I would work with them very closely to ensure that they felt empowered to be able to add exercise themselves. I would never suggest things to them if it was obvious that they weren't ready for change, so I would use the ready for change reckoner and to be able to understand whereabouts they were in readiness to be able to introduce more exercise to their lives. I'm also familiar with the behaviour change wheel and the COM-B model, and had to use this in an essay to come up with an idea of how I would implement behaviour change in a real life situation. I did have to study the behaviour change wheel and the COM-B model quite deeply for this essay, and feel that I would be very confident using this in practice as well. So I feel that with the motivational interviewing and the use of the behaviour change wheel, I would certainly be able to bring a person-centred, individualised approach to every patient that I was dealing with. Question 3. I understand that I would be bound by lots of different ethical guidelines and considerations during this role. First of all, I do understand from my previous jobs the role of confidentiality and data protection in this kind of job. So I also understand the need for consent with any sort of participant that we're using, or any sort of input with the client. Everything has to happen with their consent, everything has to be confidential, and the data must be stored in a certain way. I also understand that I must adhere to the 5 competencies of a health psychologist. I also understand that I have to adhere to local policy and procedure and national policies and procedures that relate to this role. I also understand that from an ethical point of view, there may be animal testing involved in treatments and interventions for this group of people with lung conditions, and I accept and understand that, as I also already do work in medical research. As a health psychologist, I'm regulated by the Health and Care Professionals Council, and so would have to adhere to the guidelines from that organisation as well. I understand the need for responsible social media use to make sure that I'm not promoting or posting anything that may be considered inappropriate. I am a non-smoker, and therefore there would be never any worry about me posting pictures of myself or being seen smoking or anything like that whilst working with these groups of people, which would obviously be inappropriate, and I understand that. I understand when it would be necessary to potentially break confidentiality from a legal perspective, and understand that the rest of the time when I would need to keep confidentiality. I also understand the ethical and legal considerations that I may have regarding my colleagues, and also again for confidentiality and when to break it. Question 4. I feel that I can already demonstrate a commitment to continuing professional development, as I qualified as a midwife when I was in my late 20s. I then went on to a career in medical research, and I am now training as a health psychologist in my 40s. I've always loved to stay ahead of the game, as it were, and keep up to date with new developments in the fields of treatments and things like that, which is why I went to work in medical research in the first place. I feel that this job would enable me to use all the current and up-to-date knowledge to be able to help people to manage their long-term lung conditions. I have always been a person that uses reflective practice, as this is a requirement of a nurse or a midwife, and this is also a requirement of a health psychologist, so I will definitely continue to keep a reflective diary, a reflective log. I will also continue to try and develop as a health psychologist, and would look in the future to potentially completing my PhD and becoming a fully qualified health psychologist. I would obviously keep an up-to-date portfolio, as is required as a health psychologist, and would take part in regular supervision. I would love the opportunity to take part in any training opportunities that would present themselves as part of the organisation, should I be successful in applying for the role, as I do really enjoy education and keeping myself up to date with any new developments.